Take it away, Catherine.
Okay, so this is yeah. I am really excited about this. We face so many challenges, and the biggest challenge, in my view, that we face really is heat, because everything on the planet has been evolved to function in a quite narrow range of temperatures. So everything that we know and love has the same general temperature choice. And as that gets hotter, that puts pressure on all the life that's on the planet. So temperature for me, it is like the big thing. And it's sort of like a fever in a person, you don't say, oh, yeah, you've got a fever. That's fine. Pat him on the head and let him go. You try and bring that fever down. So for me, that is the whole heart of the biotic pump. It is the way in which we can bring the fever down. We are um, have been talking about the overshoots, and the the overshoots are real. And I think the biotic pump addresses 9 areas of overshoot, and I'll talk about that later. Our temperature has been stable for 65 million years, so that's a lot of evolution that has been functioning in this. So temperature is just um, a huge issue, and it impacts everything. We have lost ice, and ice was one of the major cooling factors. And because we've lost ice, we're never going to be as cold as we have been. So it's really important for me that we do everything we can to help the Earth cool the way the Earth has been cooling for millions of years. And then hopefully we'll all evolve as we get better at this and figure out how to do it in a different way. Um, I feel a sense of urgency about that. And the thing about plants is that it's not an instant, you don't push a button and you change the temperature. This is going to take time. So the sooner that we start, the more likely it is that we'll have success. Um, the longer we wait, the more the temperature is going to impact what's planted. So we typically think about the water cycle like this. And I'll bet it's something that everybody is familiar with. So my question to you, and please just unmute and say what you think. What's missing?
Soil.
Yes, exactly.
Sorry, I couldn't find my button.
Exactly. There's no mention of soil in this process at all. And without the soil being alive enough to hold water, none of this works.
Yep.
None of this works. And that's it's huge. And we're not talking about groundwater either. And you will not have streams and creeks without groundwater. That's where it all comes from. A lot of lakes are groundwater. So the ground has to hold water before we're going to see it. And without that, it's not going to happen. This is the newest picture that I could find. They don't call it the biotic pump, but what they do show here that is really key is the role of deforestation. So 60% of the rain that falls internally to a continent comes through the biotic pump action. Only 40% is on the edges of the continents, which is where we normally think of this process happening. So plants are just key. And as we reduce forest, we also increase the temperature. So those two things are really very tightly tied. They speak here of infiltration and groundwater recharge, but they don't really talk about it as part of the pump, as an incredible piece of the pump. And it is. It's like any system. The biotic pump is a system for rainmaking, and it's a whole system. And like any system, it needs all its parts functioning. So we do pieces, and we've got pieces going in lots of different ways. but I haven't heard anybody talk about the entire system. And that's something that I really, really want people to begin to understand and to incorporate in whatever they're doing so that you see how you contribute to the whole and you can begin to partner with and notice those places that need additional help and bring that forward. Because just working on a piece of it is not going to be sufficient. So healthy soil is absolutely the key. They're saying that 2/3 of life on Earth is in the soil, which is huge. If you're concerned with biodiversity, that's one of the best places to start, in my view. Only healthy soil will hold water. If the soil is dirt, if it's dead, water runs off it. It's compacted. It doesn't hold. It doesn't allow seepage. And by adding only 1% of humus to 1 acre of soil, you can hold 25,000 gallons of water in that acre. Old streams appeared. We've got lots of stories from permaculture where as they do their water work and slow water and allow it to sink, that they suddenly discover that streams run all year, that streams that were dead for a long time come back to life. I'm really a fan of Joe Brewer's and his river work, but I really think that the biotic pump has a larger impact than just focusing on a river because you'll get your rivers if you do your biotic pump. And compost is, of course, one of the easiest things to do to add humus. I mean, that's something we can all do. We can put our waste back into the soil. It's not something that most of us do. So it's the really simple, very first step that everybody can take is to really begin to compost seriously. Living soil has protozoa, bacteria, fungi, nematodes, and lots of other animals that live there. And it needs all of those things to clean and detoxify and to become fluffy, to have spaces to hold water. And there's such a symbiotic relationship between plants and plant roots and how deep the water goes in the soil. And I'm going to talk about some really good examples of that in just a minute. So we can strengthen the soil. That's something that everybody can do. This is just not rocket science. So you can do it through soil science, which means that you're really looking at the bacteria and the nematodes and the parasites and all that you have in the soil, and then adding them or taking them out, depending on what you need, based on science. You can do this. It's expensive, it takes time, and it takes a lot of education to be able to make that. If you're interested in this, I strongly recommend the Soil Food Web. It is a wonderful place to learn about soil and to be trained to be a soil scientist, and you have a new career. So I promote it absolutely. It's hard, however, for local folks, residents, just people who are living a normal everyday life to really take that step, I think. So we have been promoting compost because everybody can do it. And the other thing is biochar. Biochar is a really old technology. It came out of the Amazon jungle. So we're talking Indians who have no technology, quote unquote, and they're just using what they have. And they have created a kind of soil called terra preta, which actually reproduces itself up to a foot a year. And that soil is 30 to 40% biochar, but we have not been able to recreate it, as far as I know. Biochar is a very porous material. So it forms, all those little holes are great homes for bacteria. They also are a great place to hold toxins. So it will filter out toxins from soil and hold it. It doesn't get rid of them, but it keeps them inert. It cleans water in the same kind of way. And because biochar is carbon, and it's a great way for cities in particular to get rid of a lot of the woody waste that urban forests produce without adding it to the landfill. It is a carbon sink. This has become actually one of the major ways in which biochar is being used because it does sink carbon. Farmers are actually paid to use biochar as a carbon sink, so it becomes an income stream. And while that's not totally negative, it really puts aside and makes less important the environmental impacts, which I think are actually more important than the fact that we're just sinking carbon. And it also means that you might not do it right. So because biochar is hollow, it needs to be inoculated so that those hollow things are filled with good stuff, because it will naturally fill with good stuff or with bad stuff, depending on your soil. But that can become a taking as opposed to a giving for the first year if it's not inoculated correctly. But it has a long-term impact because it stays in the soil forever. So it's a really, I think, good addition to speeding up soil health. And you can make it at home. There's lots of different ways to make it in small amounts or in bigger amounts, like the barrel that you're seeing. Kilpie Wilson has just done a Ring of Fire kiln, which is mobile. It's one of the big ways that biochar is being used now is in forest reforestation. So after a forest fire, people come in and burn char, what's left, and then just leave it in the soil. So there's a lot of this happening in forest reforestation after fires. But this is so key. This is we have to keep the soil in the water. We have to keep the water we get. We're finding changes in the water patterns. If, like where I am in Spokane, we depend on snowmelt. Well, we can't do that anymore. It's melting faster earlier, and so it's not there in the summer. The only place that water is going to be kept is in the soil. You can't do tanks to make this happen. It has to be spread over the land. You want to have all the soil as moist as possible, because moist soil is part of the cooling mechanism. So the more we can make sponge cities, I like your juiciness very much. China has really done a major nationwide push to do sponge cities. And I got a great article on that if you're interested. The guy who's promoting that is really very sweet. Oh, interesting. So the other piece that I'm not hearing people talk about is regenerative landscape design. This means that the land itself is designed to hold water. So the soil is a piece, but also the land has to be designed to give the water time to sink. This is especially true when we get a lot of water. So good land design will let water move in a way that it can slow and stop and sink. It gives it that time to go on. And I've got a really great example that I'm going to share. Nature does this naturally, but when we build, we often make it flat. So it's easy to build on, and that destroys the natural water holding capability. One of the things that we're doing at Soil Smart is working on bills to submit to both Washington and Oregon state legislatures that new development is required to design the land to hold water before it's built on. If you do that first, then all the hardscape you put in becomes channels to support that as opposed to impediments, but you have to have the design there first. And doing so really reduces maintenance costs tremendously. So this is the shining example, and it's Village Homes in Davis, California. This is 60 acres of land, and the people who bought it designed it with all of this in mind. It was a wheat field, and the designers wanted, it's really sweet. He said the wheat field had no runoff, and he wanted to make sure that this subdivision didn't have any runoff either, that all the water it got, it kept. And so it was designed so that the water flows, and the streets are part of that. So the streets channel the water to where the water needs to be. A few years ago, they had a 500-year water event. So they got 5 or 6 inches of water in a day, and they had no flooding. Yes, they had water everywhere, but it was fine. It was designed to hold it. So it didn't impact the residents. They could still drive. They didn't have any flooding. They didn't have any problems. Um, it saved on building costs because in normal building, you direct water using concrete pipes. They don't have any concrete pipes. And the money they would have used for concrete pipes, instead, they bought fruit trees. So there are people living here who can get up to 75% of their food from the gardens and the fruit trees that are already planted. This is 260, I believe, residences, and 25 multifamily homes, and 8 businesses are in this 80 acre or the 60 acres. So it's a real good example of what good planning can do. So groundwater, we don't talk about groundwater. It's sort of this mysterious stuff, but it has to come from someplace in order to be there. And if we do these things, if we have healthy soil, if we design the land to hold water, then we can begin to feed the underground water system. And we'll lose that if we don't have the soil that will allow that water to percolate down. When Village Homes was built, in the first 3 years, the water went down 3 feet. After 3 years, the water went down 18 feet. So the roots and the trees help to permeate all of that, which is why part of the reason why they had no flooding, because after 50 years, tree roots and everything else have gone down far enough that actually the water table has come up so that they meet, and it keeps everything green. It's just an absolutely beautiful example of what we can do if we want to. So the sponge city is a movement, actually. I guess China coined the phrase sponge city, but Tucson, Los Angeles, Singapore, Auckland, New York, Nairobi, Mumbai, Philadelphia, lots of cities are taking this on and beginning to rethink how they use their land and how to redesign their land so that they do have the ability to hold water. But the soil is really key, because if you do a pond that's clay, the water's not going down. So you really have to have that porosity in the soil to make sure that it sinks, which is all about keeping the water we get. That is just so key. And forests are one of the most wonderful ways to do that. So at Soil Smart, one of the things that we're really promoting is the Miyawaki forest method. For a number of reasons. It's been done worldwide and in all climates and in all environments. So there is, yes, a desert approach, just like there is an approach for the Midwest and the Northwest and the Northeast and the South. Everything is site specific. So you really have to get the original plants that were there. And I have some concern about this, and this is just my thinking, and I have absolutely no support, and I would appreciate support if anybody knows how about this. Because we are getting warmer, I have some concerns that the original plants might not be totally appropriate. And there's a number of issues with that. The benefits are with the original plants and planting all of them together very tightly as they would grow means that they grow very fast. And it also means that all those plants have agreements with each other already. They know how to work together. They've already made the changes that they need to be beneficial for each other. So inserting plants that don't have that agreement, I'm not clear about the benefit of that, if any. I do think temperature is an issue, but I would go with the agreements before I would go with the temperature, just because they could probably figure out the temperature quicker than a new party, but I don't know. So the forests do all of these things, and the cooling effect, of course, is huge. but it's also the pump part of the pump. So you need plants as this intermediary between the wet soil and the air to create the rain. The water rivers, the flying rivers that go around the world, are how rain is passed from one continent to another. What that means is that deforestation in one place actually creates drought in someplace else, which is why it's sort of been hard to pinpoint, because it's hard to know why suddenly you have drought. If we understood how the flying rivers work, and we have some in understanding of that, but they're changing now because of the deforestation and because of the changing climate. Um, we can really help each other if we make the biotic pump where we are as strong as we can, because it will support this system, which is a worldwide system. So a Miyawaki forest grows really fast. They grow about 8 times faster, and you can see the difference here. It takes a small space. It's 1,000 square feet, 6 parking spaces. That's backyards for many of you, I'm sure. They're all planted tightly together. They're irrigated for 3 years. They need very little weeding. And after 3 years, they're self-supporting, and you don't need to irrigate them at all. And they say after 25 years, it mimics old growth. We don't have a lot of 25-year-old Miyawaki forests. There are a few, mostly in Japan. This is another example of how fast the forest grows. So this is like 2 years. So it's this combination, this whole system that makes the pump work. And we have to have all the pieces. They all have to be there. It takes all of us to do this. And deforestation is such a key thing to pay attention to. It also speaks to me very much about the benefits of old growth forests, which go way beyond what we've really been thinking about. If we lose those old growth forests, we are losing all of those old resilient conversations that those forests have formed. That's what's key to the Miyawaki method, is that those relationships are already there, and it takes thousands and thousands and thousands of years to plant, for plants to come together in this kind of way. So we need to support that in every way we can if we're sort of crunched for time. So this is our strategy. Soil health, which everybody can do through composting. Biochar is a really easy addition. You can do and should do other additions if you have the capacity and the interest. If you have the capability to do landscape redesign, then you should really add that piece so that you can put dry creek beds and rain gardens and swales on your property so that you can begin to hold the water you get. As I said, a 2,000 square foot house gets, oh, and I'm not remembering this exactly right, something like 21,000 gallons of water a year at 17 inches of rain, which is dry. So every person gets a lot more water than they use. And if you can keep it in your soil, you're helping everybody to do that. And if you have the space and the interest, planting mini forests is really a wonderful thing to do. You can do it with your neighbors. Just think for a minute, if everybody on your block, or maybe a square of like 4 blocks around you, all planted mini forests, what would your place look like? It would go up in property values, and you'd be living in a forest. The other thing that forests do is it brings back biodiversity. So there are all sorts of reports of animals and insects that have been vanished from this place for a long period of time coming back when their homes came back. So this is another issue that we can address through the biotic pump. So I talked about the 7 overshoot issues that it addresses. So it addresses climate change by really cooling the planet. It addresses air pollution because rain cleanses the air. It addresses biodiversity loss because the Miyawaki forests bring back things, and living soil brings back things. So you've got 2 ways to address biodiversity loss. land conservation. We are really needing to make much better use of the land that we have. And when I use the term use, I kind of cringe because that's really old thinking. We need to have as much healthy land around us as possible because we really need that life. We really need that plant biomass to exist. This is true in agriculture as well, that it really needs to become soil enhancing instead of a soil depleting activity. If it did that, if it shifted its process, so it did all of these things, so it planted forests around the edges and in different ways, it begins to be a support for the health of the system. And that's really what we need. Farmers are being pushed into new land because the land they have has been degraded. So they need to learn to make the land they have as rich as possible. And then they don't need additional land because we can't afford to do that. We've got to keep as much land healthy as possible. And it needs to be in its natural state as possible. It increases freshwater withdrawals because the groundwater will add water to that fresh water. It reduces nitrogen and phosphorus loading because you're not adding nitrogen and phosphorus. You're adding everything the plant needs, not in an imbalanced way. And it reduces chemical pollution because you're not needing fertilizers and pesticides. So it really has a huge potential for addressing so many of the issues that we have. But it's got to be done at scale. So the soil health and the regenerating forests work hand in hand. It really improves our living space. It makes it more comfortable for us. It keeps it cooler. It keeps it healthier. There is so much research about the difference in our physical health when we're in relationship to nature. There's a wonderful study which I've been trying to find, and I only have vocal evidence for. It's a guy in Oregon who looked at the ash borer impact on ash trees, and he documented that where those trees died, the number of heart attacks went up, number of strokes went up, the amount of mental illness went up. So if his correlations between the loss of those trees and those kinds of physical and mental ailments is true, we can have a lot to do. I mean, putting back forests is one of the best things that we can do for us at every level. It gives us an increased access to water. Feelings of the anxiety that we're feeling diminishes when we're in the forest. We get feelings of peace of mind. And to be able to do this, to know that we can make these changes, is quite a feeling of accomplishment and gives us a great deal of meaning in life, I believe. But the spiritual side, I've been working with nature for a long time to try and understand what the ethics are that nature seems to follow in order to have so much integrity in everything that it does. Everything seems to work in nature. And that's been sort of a question. So I've deduced 16 things in my research that people seem to agree on that nature does, but there are two that are really key here. One, and this comes from Jeannie Benyus and biomimicry, that all actions create the conditions that support life. So in the biotic pump, that's absolutely true. Everything you do there creates the conditions that support life. And the other thing is that everything supports the integrity of the whole. That is also true with the biotic pump, that the health of the biotic pump supports the integrity of the whole in so many ways. So that's that. We're open to questions, comments, thoughts.
Can I just speak? Sorry.
Sure, sure,
I just
sure.
wanted to say thank you, Catherine. This was fantastic. I put a little note in the chat. I would love to schedule time to talk further. I just joined a board in Richmond where I'm very passionate about a big project called Groundwork Richmond, and they're part of the
Wonderful.
grant right now, and they're already planting trees, but I'd love to see if I have
Oh,
to
yeah,
join first, but I'd love to get you to present. I'm
absolutely.
joining next month in July.
Okay. One of the things that I've discovered, and it would be hilarious if it isn't so sad, that when you talk to urban foresters, there is almost never a discussion about soil.
I
They
know.
will, they will tell you they don't care about it, they don't worry about it, and they lament that there so many of their plantings don't work.
I mean, yeah, there's so
Yes.
many. Yes.
Yes, it's just like, I can't believe this. I talked to a lady here in Spokane. We've got two groups. They've each got $6 million to plant trees. So I talked to one of the women who's doing 6 million of the 12 and said, have you thought about soil? Well, we don't plant like forests. We're just planting individual trees. Yeah, I wonder if you may want to reconsider that. But given that they've already got the money from the government, I am sure that in that grant, and I don't know, but I would really believe that they've already said we're going to do these kinds of trees, that was part of the grant. If they didn't decide what kind of trees they had in the grant, then there's really options. If they did put the kind of trees in the grant, then that really limits options. But that doesn't mean that everything has to be planted separately. I mean, there are just all sorts of other changes that I think can be made within that grant context to improve their results. So anyway, but it's a hard discussion. They just don't seem to get it. It's really interesting.
Well, I could monopolize all of this, and I don't want to do that, but I'll leave you with this. I mean, I still feel really strongly about the how. And one of the things I've done in my own yard in El Cerrito has been trying to teach my neighbors about regenerating topsoil. So I kind of went wild. My front yard looks like Tilden, which is my regional park. My backyard, I didn't have as much success because it's too dry, but I've been doing layers of yard cuttings, compost, and then mulch. And we get the compost and mulch free in El Cerrito. And it's amazing how many people have come back and just been like, your yard smells so good. And look at, and our, even like in a month and a half since I've really been showing and telling, they can, uh, people that were previously with grass in their front yards are now converting. So this is where I do think you're right on. You don't have to go to school. You can literally just start not, I think we should ban the fact that we take our yard cuttings and then send them into the industrial compost. You should just put on your front yard.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Actually, if you mulch as you mow, you don't need to do anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
that's hard on compost because then you'll have green stuff to put in there. Wonderful. So join us. Sign up on the website, soilsmart-soilwise.org. Yeah.
Well, I just want to say an excellent presentation and delivered so well. You're a really compelling speaker. I thought it was excellent. I was surprised that you didn't mention the fungal activity of soil. In talking about the relationships between plants and kind of I
Yeah.
think that's kind of the
That's a key. That's key. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's why no-till in agriculture is really important. But the less we disturb the soil, the better for just that reason, because when the fungi create their connections, every time you cut the soil, you sever those connections and they have to be rebuilt. So, yeah.
and just I know like in orchards sometimes people will plant orchards and all the trees will die, and what they'll have to do is actually bring in soil from someplace else that has some sort of the mycorrhizal spores in the soil so that the trees can actually start to grow.
Yeah.
Just
Well, and there's
yeah.
cover crops they can plant there actually, that will help do that. That's one of the problems with monoculture too. And that's why the Miyawaki method uses all the original plants, because you need all those plants to create the healthy soil. Every plant has its own contribution. So when you have monocultures, you're not getting the diversity that the soil needs to really be healthy. So even if leaves drop, they're only the same kind of leaf. So you need to put other stuff underneath those trees to facilitate that. Aaron?
Well, thank you. Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Catherine, thank
Yes.
you. That's a great presentation. And I just have a question about drip irrigation. It is suggested as an alternative for water issues, and at a policy level, government pushes it on small farmers. Now, watching this, I'm wondering, because just say if you have a coconut grove and then you water only the roots of the coconut and leave the rest of it not moist, it's not just affecting microbes, it's also creating almost like a heat that may affect the coconut tree itself. Right. So I'm wondering, what do you think of drip irrigation? And is there some research or something that we can take back to our farmers and say, maybe it's not the best thing for your situation?
I'm not the expert on that, so I can't speak from an expert place. What I would suggest, though, is if the farmers understood the sponge idea and got a chance to look at their plantations, then ask them what they think, what they would suggest to make all of that soil work together instead of doing these little pockets that might be not too bad. I'll bet you they come up with ideas and would have their own understanding about that.
Thank you.
I don't know if it's relevant, but I know in wine, we always felt it was far preferable to see a dry farmed vineyard as opposed to drip irrigation, because it trained the plant to go deeper. And that if you continue to just drip irrigate, you just had those roots living in the topsoil, and you really did want the life to go as deep as it could. If that's helpful.
Good answer.
But it really does depend on the crop and of course the microclimate and the region, et cetera, et cetera. It's just so much more involved in that. I would also consider having that conversation around secondary crops, which would be the ground covers between the trees. So then there's a justification for spreading the water further. And also you've got the foliage shielding the soil to a great extent, plus the root mass of those crops. Like peanuts, there's a lot of things that farmers could do as a secondary income around the coconuts. So they can get a return on the increased upfront costs, but also the increased labor that would be implied by going beyond just the coconuts. So maybe even because I know in a tropical situation you've got coconuts are fairly continually cropping, but who wouldn't want to gain extra income from the same acreage or hectarage?
Thank you. Yeah, because I think most of the advice then comes from people who may not be there. So, for instance, now I wonder, when there is standing water in rice, yes, of course, there's trouble, but also water percolates. So if you don't have standing water in rice, then there's no percolation. And especially if you don't have a very porous sort of ground below, then you have to really keep that water for a bit. So for it to get to the water table below. So, I don't know whether some of the advice is actually good advice.
Yeah, I agree with Catherine on that. I think even if it's just a small starting group of farmers from the same region, or even better, the same locale, who could kind of come up to speed on this whole soil sponge concept, then they're going to be the best ambassadors anyway, right? You don't need to keep bringing in these, experts in quotations, because the farmers are the experts. They may need to update their understanding of what the dynamic is, but once they have that, then they're going to be the ones who probably have the best strategies to achieve it. And like, any other situation on the planet where you've got farmers and farming, everyone's looking over to the next field to see, like, hey, he's got a little bit more green than I do. Like, what's he doing different? It works quite well.
Yeah.
A little bit of a segue, Catherine, but I've been my wife is in public health, and we just got back from participating. She was at the Aspen Ideas Festival, and one of the topics of one of the speeches, one of the talks was around the value of having trees in urban areas, and they kind of as a public health thing, not as a
Right.
tree thing. And it's funny to see what I think are the cascading benefits that we want to look for in regeneration, but kind of coming from this research public health perspective. And
Yes.
there's a lot of research going on, and the results are coming out pretty positive. And there are like some discussion over why they're beneficial, kind of, but you can see it on multiple dimensions, I think. And so I think we'll see other sectors kind of reinforcing your message. So,
And I think kind of part of what you're implying there, David, it has to do with this kind of cross-sectoral approach, to these things, which of course are, in by their very nature, multidimensional or multisectoral. So where you've got this public health, you've also got a whole conversation and groups that are quite willing to take it up and take it further around equity, right? So why are the wealthiest neighborhoods the greenest, right?
Yes.
And why are the lower income areas suffering from the greatest heat because they don't have any kind of green air conditioning going on, this sort of thing. There's also a number of studies that have been done. Now, this is easily 15, 20 years ago in the UK, I think it was, but I came across some which correlated antisocial behavior. Oh, there was a really important one in Boston, actually.
Yes.
Correlated antisocial behavior and tree planting.
Yep.
And crime levels. Right.
Yep.
And it was like 20% drop in antisocial behavior and crime the very day the trees were installed. So there's all of that to call upon too, and then we can get back into sort of the intersectionality of it all.
But just remember, it's not just planting trees. You've got to have the soil there.
Of course.
That's why I'm such a big proponent of the whole pump, and to get the whole pump and then do what you do. But
you need that hook. You need that hook to get their
Yes.
attention. And then once you've got it, you can do the education. You can go, okay, well, this is like all you're seeing is kind of like what's above the ground, but it's not going to succeed if we don't take care of this other piece.
Yeah.
I think it's the hook thing that Catherine that gets me, because the way the research works is they're only going to change one variable, right? And so you have to somehow integrate into that mindset, I guess.
Right. Yep. Yep. But I just really feel it's such a wonderful thing for residents of cities in particular, because the city's already there. People are already living there, and we're talking about green cities and how to make it greener. But to actually make the city part of the Biotic pump would just be wonderful. I mean, it really is a step above just kind of surviving kind of thing. You really become part of the environment in a beneficial way, and we can do that.
Catherine, as far as you know, is there any kind of sort of interchange and network between and among the sponge cities?
Not that I know
are they consciously sharing strategies or results or anything like that?
Not that I know of.
That seems like a simple thing to get activated.
Yes.
And because like my rule of thumb for creating momentum for change, I suppose, is that things have to happen in threes, right? So for people to look at them, because when they see the one thing, they can say it's a one-off. If they say two things, they can call it a coincidence. But the moment you have three, then our minds start perceiving pattern.
Right.
Right. And if maybe, using the elements which are already in place and just kind of nudging a little bit into position, we could get something a little more active. It might be as simple as setting up, a platform for the sponge cities to start talking to each other, and
It's a great
someone in there to
idea.
kind of activate the conversation initially.
Right. It's a great idea.
I'm on board for whatever I can help with.
Ooh, okay,
Just
let's talk. Yeah,
Just so you know.
Thank you.
I find this just endlessly promising and stimulating.
Yes,
Could you, by the way, could you put your the URL for your website that you mentioned people should go to?
I think
Yeah,
I
David,
did there, just
Is
above
that in
your
the chat?
comment there. I just put
yeah,
above your
Photo
comment there,
smart
yeah.
soil wise, got it.
yeah, that's an old URL. So we've actually changed it, but that
Okay.
should still take you there. If everything's working right, and it now is. It was several weeks, by the way, to make that work. But the current real name is, I can spell. There you go.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, maybe
yeah.
that's, kind of what do you want to, what is your direction, Catherine? What are you thinking about doing with this stuff? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So what we have going so far, and I'm really looking for people because I will have to tell you, I've been very gratified. I put up the website for Soil Smart, Soil Wise in May, and we had over 500 people in the first month. And I've got 20 people, over 20 people who have pledged to do something for their soil, to keep their earthworms healthy and to keep as much water as they can that they get. So those is a small group of people that want to be active in some kind of way. And I've had 2 people volunteer to help. So all of that is wonderful and not sufficient. Um, so we're working with a couple of folks, and I'm trying to develop a bigger team to create legislation in both Washington and Oregon that new development should must design their land to hold water before they build, because that's the easiest time to do that. It would be the biggest bang for the buck. It would make the potential for water retention inherent in that piece of property. So that's one project that we're working on. If you'd like to help with that, it would be really great. The other thing is talking to urban foresters to just include soil in what they do, and then to begin to understand how they're really supporting the biotic pump. Urban foresters have a huge impact on the city infrastructure. And if they could just get their head around dirt, that would really be useful. So if you want to be helpful with that, please let me know. It's another place that we can really use help with. And then just getting people to do Miyawaki forests. There's some wonderful folks that I'm connecting with. There's a great book by Hannah Lewis called Mini Forest Revolution, where she details all of this. So it's sort of a help book. There's a group in Berkeley, California, that was putting Miyawaki forests in schools. And she's got a guidebook for how to do that. So if that excites you, let me know and we can do this. So those are the current really big projects that I'm thinking of that we have. And if you have other ideas, I mean, you can do stuff in your own place. You don't. And I would love to support you in that. So if you need help, to reach out and we can support you in any way that we can on how to do this. Yeah, we're new. We've only been in existence since February. So we have a lot of things, a lot of irons in the fire, and it's going to take a while to actually manifest stuff. And it's going to take a lot of folks, not just me.
I'm curious about the strategy for getting the cities to require pre-built spongification, for lack of a better expression.
Yeah.
Like, my understanding is that, or my intuition around that, I'd say is because we were able to get the city of Dublin, Ireland, to require green roofs on all new buildings.
Oh, okay.
Now, but we had for one thing, we had a very, very good collaboration with the head planner for the city. So yeah, he was actually asking us for suggestions because he already saw the value. But as well, they had a specific mechanism that they could wield to require that, which is basically they were the ones who were giving the building permits.
Mhm.
And they just simply said, well, if you want the permit, you got to do this. So I imagine it's going to depend city council by city council, where the levers of influence how they might be operated.
Well, that's why we're working at the state level.
Mhm.
Because once the state says that, then the cities get to figure out how to do it. And
Okay.
it gives them clout. They can say, well, we're mandated by the state.
Yeah,
So it
yeah,
makes it an easier implementation for the city. That's why we're starting at the state
it
level.
does. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And are you getting good uptake so far
Yes, yeah, yeah. People haven't thought about it. I mean, it's just not been on the radar. And when you go through what that does and why it's important, it really does make a difference, and it makes sense to people. I mean, this is not rocket science, and most of us know all these pieces. We've just not put it together. So it's not like it's a shocking information. It's just like, oh yeah, I never understood how all that worked. So it's not a really difficult sell. I'm also finding here in Spokane, at least, that Native people have a real interest in this.
Yes, of course.
It
Yeah,
really supports so much of what they're doing. So we have some really strong Native leaders here who really
yeah, you
want to
do.
take this on. So yeah,
Yeah, that's a super plus.
yeah. I mean, we all want to live in a nicer spot, you know?
I
We
get
really,
I get I get the sense that at least I've been hopefully not too naively operating under uh, this idea that by focusing on things like water retention and sponge cities and maybe eventually getting them to actually think about biotic pump as a thing, that we can sidestep all the politicization around fossil fuels and carbon and CO2.
I'm really hoping so.
I
Yeah,
really hope so.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm I in the past, I've really not led with the climate change thing much at all. I'm kind of slowly changing that, but I don't push it for just that reason, because it really doesn't matter. This works. If you don't believe in climate change, it still works. If you like trees, it still works. If you want to improve your property values, it still works.
Yeah,
So you
exactly.
don't
If you want to cool down the city, it still works. If you want to save money on air conditioning, it still works.
if you don't want to spend money on infrastructure and development, see, that's one of the
Yeah,
benefits of
yeah.
the land redesign is it will save building costs. So the person who's doing the land development may not be doing the building, but it would be a plus for him to be able to say to the builder, you don't have to spend money on these kinds of things because we've done this work. So there
Also,
are
yeah.
yeah, whiffums in it.
So, so what's happening here in Spain is, of course, that communities are being told that they have to like stop using water.
Yes, yes, exactly.
You
We
know,
have a big no water use movement here too, and that's fine, but it's not sufficient.
but it's also like a corrective to say, look, if we do this, we can stabilize our water availability.
We use a lot less water because the water is in the soil. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep, yep, yep. Keeping the water we get. That's if you do that, you don't have to use as much water.
And you have more available when you want to use it.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And like I said, if you don't get the water in the summer that you used to get because of snowfall or any of those things, then this is a real good strategy to go through those drought periods.
Yeah.
Well,
I
thank
just
you.
wanted to say thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Miss Catherine. I really appreciated your presentation. And I also heard you say something about it's going to take you time to get, you know, uh, the inertia of motion, right? That things will build. But I wanted to say that out of the gate, 500 people on your website, 2 volunteers, people interested in making commitments, right? that's huge, and
Yeah.
that also connects you with funders who want to see results. That we've been open since February and there's like 500 people here and there's a real need. And I love this team that you're already accomplishing. And I just wanted to say thank you and all the best always. And that, like, thank you for everything. That was great. Wonderful today. And sorry I was late, but it was wonderful. And thank you so much, Ms. Catherine.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you. So thank you, David, for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Just
thanks for doing it.
uploaded
This
it.
is I'd love to have, like the conversations around what people are doing and how can we support it and, spread the word. Yeah. I think this is kind of what we're supposed to be doing, right?
Good. Yes.
Yeah, I can see an opportunity here. I go to meetings with the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food tomorrow. And they're always wondering about, what can we do to help our state? And I'm going to try and see if they will allow me to have you introduce this to them. Okay. Because you're very persuasive, Catherine. And you have this kind of calm, wonderful demeanor about you that it all kind of goes with the program, and it kind of de-escalates so much of what we've got going on politically right now, which is wonderful. So, yeah.
Yeah,
I just stuck in
anywhere. So yeah,
I just stuck in their file before we closed down the chat. It's an article on the Biotic pump and its workings in our region of Spain.
Oh, nice.
So
anybody who has information on the Biotic pump, please send that to me too, because that's hard to find. You'd be surprised. I have been using the term Biotic pump very deliberately. A lot of people will call this the small water cycle. Well, there's nothing small about it. And if you Google small water cycles, you don't get the Biotic pump. You don't get the full thing. Soil is still missing in the conversation. Some people are calling it the new water cycle. Okay, but it's the same thing. You can't Google it and get any new information, and soil is still not part of the conversation. So that's why I'm using the Biotic pump, because if you do Google that, you do get the full discussion. Eric, you were going to say something?
No, I was just going to mention that as of our Regen Ag call yesterday, I agreed to set up a library for GRC. And I've been in the process of loading documents into it.
Okay.
Actually, I'll stick it in here. I'll stick the access here right here. You can find it on the shared page anyway, but I'll put it in so just in case, like it's on the drive, right? So, but what I would invite is if folks I'll start a folder for contributions, because I am trying to kind of like manage it to a certain, so it doesn't go into chaos, right? So what I'll do is I'll set a folder in there for people to dump stuff, and then I can go through it and just decide kind of which folder it maybe fits best.
Okay.
It's just a start, but I think it's going to be really helpful. And there's a couple of documents in there already about the Biotic pump.
I would also mention I have two YouTube channels. One is for Soil Smart, Soil Wise, and the other one is Bridge to Partnership. And both of those YouTube channels have a ton of stuff, with Bridge to Partnership being the richest right now, because I've been doing that for several years. But there's a whole lot of stuff in there. I would also mention I have a community, a community called the Coming Home Project, which is a place, again, a repository for information. And there's a bunch of stuff there. We do periodic talks, classes on this stuff will be available there, that kind of thing. So it will be connected to the Soil Smart, Soil Wise website. And that's where we'll hold classes. Oh, nice. Thanks, David.
Hey, Kevin, and I put in the chat a little earlier, to Eric's interview with Dee Dee Pershouse. Have you talked with Dee Dee?
I know who she is, but
her?
I don't know her.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, she's been talking about this kind of in these general realm for a while now, and really interesting storyteller. So worth connecting with. She's in the GRC, but not very active.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's actually my former neighbor when I lived in Vermont.
Uh-huh.
It was really fun to talk to her. Yeah.
She'll love it when things like that happen. So David, did you put any connection to her in there? I remember you said something about her at one point, but
I stuck in the link to Eric's interview, and you can find her in the GRC in Slack and stuff.
okay.
But she probably has a. Let me just look and see if I can find her web presence too.
Dave, I just added her link because I'm trying to download a
Yeah.
a book, a facilitator's manual on soil and water from her site. So
Yeah, there you go. Catchy URL, DD process. So fantastic. Well, I'll post the chat. I mean, we don't have to stop talking, but I'll post the chat and I'll post the recording to the Slack as well. So
Okay, thank you very much.
or we can call it if it's done. When it's done, it's done. Catherine, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. I'm just thrilled to talk about this stuff. So anytime, any place, man.
All right.
thank you, Catherine.
Great to see you guys.
Yes. Bye-bye.